I'm Camilla Williams, born in 1925 in Minnesota. Get out your computers. One Sunday when I was 12 years old, I had an interesting experience. I saw 3 new students walk down the aisle, 2 boys and their sister. And I thought to myself, who is that cute boy? Little did I know that the cute boy would become my husband 10 years later. We were married when we were 22 years old. So isn't life full and great and full of surprises? And little also did I know that he would become a naval aviator and have a 33-year career in the Navy, leaving me home all by myself for many months on end, from 8 to 10 months it used to be then. But I wasn't exactly alone, because along came 3 boys. And I was kept plenty busy. I was occupied and challenged, and I guess really ultra challenged. He brought me to Coronado as a new bride in June of 1947 and indoctrinated me into the Navy life and his squadron at North Island. I adjusted to and enjoyed our way of life and the wonderful people who became our friends. Royce was busy flying and training for the upcoming deployment looming in our future, and before we knew it, it was time for our sad goodbyes for months, this time 10 months. And that's how I can empathize with the families in this day and age when I watch TV and I see the sad goodbyes where they are leaving for war. And I feel tears rolling down my cheeks, and I want to tell them, you know, your hellos will be so much more meaningful, and you'll be so happy when they come home again. As I referred to earlier, we have 3 sons who are the joy of our lives. Bruce was born at North Island in a Navy hospital. Craig was born at Fort Ord, Monterey, in an Army hospital. And Mark, our 3rd son, was born at Nellis Air Force Base in a hospital there. So we aren't prejudiced at all. Our youngest son was born 7 weeks premature, and we had problems when we were moving from La Jolla to Las Vegas to Nellis Air Force Base, and he thought he wanted to come early, and he did come, but luckily we reached Nellis Air Force Base and were able to move into our house that day, and I sat on stools at the sink washing dishes that the packers had brought, and at that time they didn't have what's called clean pack, so we had to wash all the dishes, and Royce wiped the dishes, put them in the cupboards, and that evening I said, I think I'm going to get ready and go to the hospital. So I showered and washed my hair, and at 4 a.m. we did go to the hospital, and our 3rd son was born 7 weeks premature. We had to leave the 2 other sons at home. One was 6 and one was 3, and but we were living on the base, but we hadn't met a soul because we had just moved in that day. And so Royce was able to go home at 7 o'clock after our son was born. We had problems with Mark because of his prematurity, and he had his soft spots started to grow together when he was 5 months old, and I knew that wasn't normal. So we went to our doctor, and he said, we're going to have to send you to Navy Hospital, Balboa Hospital, in San Diego, and you'll go in a B-25 there me, a Navy wife, going in a B-25, a bomber. Anyway, we flew there, and we were taken to Balboa Navy Hospital. And this young doctor measured Mark's head, and he said, well, you can plan to put him in a home he won't be able to sit or walk or feed himself. And that night, when we went home to a friend's place, Mark proved us wrong. He rolled over for the first time at 5 months. So the doctor was proven wrong. Mark has surprised us beyond our wildest dreams. He has an excellent vocabulary, and unfortunately, there weren't adequate schools available when we had to move almost every year. But he developed quite well, and he is just a wonderful young man. And his oldest brother turned out to be a psychologist in the field of learning disabilities. So there was a real blessing there. When Mark was 2 years old, I was out in the playground when a jet took off from the base at El Centro where we were living. And it lost power on takeoff. And another wife who was there too saw that it landed in an irrigated field, and it was we thought, well, there goes another pilot. It was either land in the irrigated field or go into this deep canyon that was ahead. And he selected the field where he had a chance of living. And a farmer was in a nearby field, and he drove his truck to the plane, and he rescued him from the plane. He was afraid that it would catch fire. That man was my husband. He sustained a broken lower spine and needed a body cast for 3 months. So life went on. Older sons thriving on moves throughout our frequent move. They were their own best friends, and they kept Dad and Mom active and busy when Dad was home. And we all played together, played touch football, ping pong, so forth, and they loved their young brother. But always the center of our life was our church. It, with a strong faith, kept us anchored and strong to bring us through whatever life gave us. Scouting was always part of their lives, and their dad was scoutmaster when he was home, and I was Cub Scout den mother. We traveled across country many times, reaching our destination with little money left over. We'd stay at a motel to house hunt, first find proper schools and church, and we'd move, and we'd hang our draperies. We had to carry our own draperies much of the time because this was many years ago. And as soon as we would get the walls painted sometimes, off he'd have to go, and he'd probably have to go on another deployment and leave me home with the 3 boys. But we always managed, and they were good boys. And we became very used to this routine. We would live someplace for a year, year and a half, and we felt very permanent in the house then. Mail was sporadic, but they had to depend on replenishment for the ship, for them to take the mail off and to bring them our mail. And it was always a big event on the ship, I understand. My husband was a wonderful long-distance father. He would console the boys, and he just it was almost as if he were there. And a big improvement in our communications came when we finally had these little tapes that we could send to them, and they went back and forth, and it was so good to hear the voice, because at that time, a telephone, it was so expensive, long distance was so expensive, and of course, we didn't have email then. In 1964, my husband had command of a squadron out of Virginia Beach, and we were living in a wonderful house right on an inlet. And so before he left for a long deployment, he bought a little 14-foot aluminum boat and 3.5 horsepower motor for our sons to go crabbing and fishing, and that was just the love of their life. We were there for a total of almost 2 years, but out of that time, Royce was home only 2.5 total months. That was every weekend. A lot of separation. On December 26, 1966, probably was our hardest goodbye ever. It was the day after Christmas. 4 commanders had already been shot down, and I knew that Royce was a leader and wouldn't just send his men, he would lead them, and lead them he did. And that proved to be so true. Even just yesterday, a friend of his called him from La Jolla, and he said, "I didn't know that you were the one who knocked out that big bridge." And he did. They'd had many tries on the bridge, and he was the lucky one to draw that job. Vietnam was more dangerous than Korea because of the deadly SAM missiles. But good old San Diego Union would publish every day how many planes were lost, how many POWs were taken. And so we wives sat home, and it was difficult wondering when the knock on the door would come. I kept in constant contact with the squadron wives, and we would share what we could when we knew that they were on the line and flying over North Vietnam. But the husbands couldn't tell us anything, of course, for security reasons. So we just did the best we could, and but the poor wives who lived in Lemoore lived on base, and they would see the big Navy cars come down the block, and they would look and wait and wonder, are they coming to my house? And one night I had a scary episode when standing by the kitchen sink in Escondido. A big car pulled into the driveway at 9 p.m. for no reason. I thought, is this it? I became weak, could hardly open our front door. I thought it was someone with news for me, but it was the man who was lost. And what a relief that was. Our oldest son graduated from high school in '66. His father came home the day before so he could attend, and he was able to attend. The Air Wing routinely came home that day. They'd been gone for 8 months. And however, 4 years later, when he graduated from Stanford, his father had to miss that important engagement, because by that time he had command of a ship and was off the coast of Vietnam. So there made a big circle. I think I forgot something really important, that when he was off the coast of Korea, he was on a carrier air patrol mission one day, and there were 4 in the flight. The flight leader developed engine trouble and had to go down, and his wingman followed him, so Royce had one wingman left with who was flying with him. And they saw these 7 MiGs coming. They could see the contrails. And before Royce knew it, and he had the sharpest eyes of any pilot in the Navy, I was told by people. And he saw these planes coming, and they broke off, and Royce got behind one. The plane shot it down. And before he knew it, there was another one, and another one. He needs to tell this story. I can't tell it, and he has told it many times. But he ended up shooting down 3 MiGs, and his own plane was badly shot up. He went back toward the carrier. It was in heavy snowstorm, and his rudder was on whatever else makes the plane go the way it's supposed to. And anyway, the ship's captain had to turn the carrier at the proper time so he could line up to come aboard the carrier, or he would have gone in the drink. It was, and that time also, the San Diego Union called me and said, "We have news for you. Your husband is okay, but his plane was badly shot up." And for that, I thank them that they prefaced it that way. So anyway, he retired in September 1975, and we are enjoying our life together.
When I came into this world, I was saved by the Navy doctors. I was 3 months premature, and I was born at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So not only was I born into the military, I was born on a military base, and I was saved by Navy doctors, which the Navy doctors played a tremendous role in my life and my father's life, our whole family's life. But it was during the Vietnam period, just before my father went to Vietnam. We lived in Quantico, Virginia, and I went to Quantico High School. And just about all of my growing up years and school years, we lived either on a military base, or I went to a military school, not necessarily like the military academies, but just run by the military. And they were all filled with dependent children of military. So we had a common bond. And growing up with military children is 360 degrees different than your average civilian schools and families. Granted, we celebrated the same holidays and everything everybody else did, but there were other holidays and traditions that we grew up with that the average run-of-the-mill civilian, and I don't mean to downplay the civilian aspect of it, but we're kind of a family within a family, being dependents. And we celebrate like the Marine Corps Birthday Ball, which is November 10th. We celebrate when they landed on Iwo Jima, February 19th. We even celebrate when they dropped both the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because they ended the war and it stopped the invasion of Japan, which would have taken millions of more men's lives and left a great many more widows of both women and children. So we have a lot of different cultural things. When we moved out here in June of '67, it was in my senior year. I had gone from 9th grade up to my junior year in one high school. Now, the high school that I came from, the whole school had 500 kids in it, and they started at 7th grade and went to 12th. We had, in our coming senior year, we would have had 54 seniors, and 15 of those would have been boys. So you know, going to the senior prom would have been a real major event as to who was going to go with who. But we came out here to California, and we moved here to Vista. And we lived on a street just off of Warmlands, not too far from here, way out in the middle of God knows where. And we never had to worry about that black car coming to find us, because they would never have found us. They would still be out there looking, but my mother even got lost a couple times and had to go back down to, at that time it was Delpy's Corner, and call and tell me she'd be a little late because she was lost. So this is how far out we lived back there. But when I started my senior year at Vista High School, the whole school had like, I don't know, 2,000 people in it. And it was like, I don't know, going to a new city to me, to go to see all these kids was just overwhelming. They wore different clothes, they wore different shoes, it was just a completely cultural change. It was like going to a foreign country almost to me. And there were other children that I had gone to school with that were at Vista, and I went my whole senior year and never saw a one of them. The only reason why I know they were there was because I went through the yearbook and I saw their picture. But we never had any classes together and never saw each other. That's how big the school was. But we got together years later and we were talking, and we had classes just kind of right down the hall, and it was like ships passing, you know, in the night, only with this great herd, you know, so you could never see anybody. But it was different growing up in a civilian community and in a civilian high school over a military one. And when my father was in Vietnam, he left July 12th, and we took him to March Air Force Base. And my father had always instructed us, as my mother and my sister and I, my sister was, no, probably 8 at the time, that you do not cry in public. You cry at home or you show emotion by yourself, but you do not cry in public where people can see you. So we said goodbye to Dad. We gave him the last hugs and kisses and sent him on his way. Where the average civilian child, when they say goodbye to their fathers or their parents in the morning, it's assumed, kind of a given, that they're going to come back. But when military children say goodbye to their parents, they don't know if they're going to come back. So it's a different kind of emotion that is expressed. It's not something that you would express openly, because we're taught not to sometimes, but it's there. And that bond sometimes is even stronger with this type of a childhood than your average civilian childhood growing up. Once a week we would make those, you know, those little tapes that you made. We would start one on a Monday, and then we would talk each night, and then that Sunday we would package it up, and the following Monday we would send it off to Dad, and then we would get one from him, and he would do the same thing. He would talk briefly about, you know, things that, you know, he would do, I'm sure. You know, he never went into a lot of the things, military things, you know, I'm sure just to keep us, you know, more on an upbeat than depressing things. But on April the 29th of 1968, we got a call about 9 o'clock at night from the Red Cross saying that Dad had been wounded from shrapnel from a 122 millimeter rocket that hit in camp. And he had his flak jacket on, which is a jacket that just covers the chest area but not the arms, and shrapnel from this went into his left arm, and it went down his arm to about here. And again, a Navy doctor saved his life and his arm. And he didn't have full use of it later on in life. He could, instead of stretching his both arms out, he could stretch one arm out and raise it about halfway, and then, but he had full rotation of it. So the Navy doctors saved his life on Iwo Jima when he was wounded twice. They saved him on in Korea when he was wounded badly, and they saved him in Vietnam when he was wounded. So granted, the Marine Corps is the greatest branch of the service, but we do have to give a little credit to the Navy corpsmen because they bring back all the men in the best that they can. So without them, you know, we wouldn't have as many coming back as we do today. But the Marine Corps is still the best fighting force there is. So, but in World War II, my mother was making strawberry preserves when they got the telegram that he was wounded on Iwo Jima. In Korea, she was making strawberry preserves when they got the telegram that he was wounded in Korea. And the night that the Red Cross called, we were making strawberry preserves. And after that, we never made strawberry preserves in the house again. We just went with, you know, whatever brand was available in the store, and that's what we used.